Hello, and welcome to another video from the H2H experiment. This time, we will talk about fear in leadership. Fear of loss, whether it shows up as fear of failure, rejection, or being left behind, is one of the most powerful and often invisible drivers of human behavior. Leaders, perhaps more than anyone else, live under its constant shadow. Every decision has weight, every choice can feel like it might invite criticism, and every risk carries the possibility of embarrassment, rejection, or outright failure. And yet here's the paradox. The very energy that once kept our species alive is now holding modern leaders back. Let me share with you a sentence that I created, one that frames this truth. Happiness is the absence of negative energy, just like darkness is the absence of light. When fear becomes the compass, anxiety and negative emotions seep into every thought, every conversation, every choice. Leadership, instead of being about building futures, becomes about avoiding dangers. And here's the key distinction. The future is not built by running away from shadows. It is built by stepping into the light proactively, intentionally, and with courage. So here's my teaser question to you as a leader, as a human. Are you avoiding risks trying to predict the future? Or are you building the future you want? Let me get something very clear. Fear is not weakness. Fear is ancient. Fear is survival. It is hardwired into our DNA because for most of human history, the fearful lived longer. Think of our ancestors. Alone, a human was fragile. We were slower than predators, weaker than the great beasts, unequipped with claws, fangs, or thick hides. What saved us was not brute strength, but the ability to anticipate danger, imagine worst-case scenarios, and take protective action. Fear kept us alive. Equally important was belonging to the group. Being cast out from the tribe meant vulnerability and likely death. That's why fear of rejection is so deeply rooted in us. It was once a survival mechanism. If you were not accepted, you were not protected. Today, we rarely face lions at the mouth of a cave, but we still experience the same neural response when facing an angry email from a boss, a critical glance in a boardroom, or the risk of a bold idea being shot down. Our nervous systems don't distinguish between predator and performance review. To the brain, fear is fear. Modern neuroscience confirms what our bodies have always known. Fear hurts. Fear and pain share neural pathways. Research shows that the anterior cingulate cortex and insula are activated both when we feel physical pain and when we experience social rejection or anticipate failure. This is why rejection stings or failure feels like being hit in the gut. The amygdala and fight or flight. When triggered by fear, the amygdala hijacks rational processing. Our body floods with cortisol and adrenaline, preparing us to fight, flee, or freeze. Fine for escaping predators, terrible for making nuanced business decisions, defensive storytelling. To avoid this pain, our psyche invents rationalizations. I'm too busy to try that. The market isn't ready. It's safer to wait. These aren't strategies. They're defense mechanisms designed to soothe the brain and avoid the perceived threat. This explains why leaders often unconsciously choose safety over vision. Fear narrows our focus to short-term survival and tricks us into calling it strategy. Fear isn't just evolutionary, it's personal. Childhood experiences shape how fear shows up in adulthood. A child ridiculed for speaking up may grow into a leader who avoids public speaking. A child punished harshly for mistakes may grow into a manager terrified of failure. A child who felt excluded may, as an adult, crave approval so intensely that they sacrifice bold ideas for safety. We carry these echoes into boardrooms and teams. Fear of rejection in the playground becomes fear of rejection from peers. Fear of failure on a school test becomes fear of failure in a corporate project. Unless we become conscious of these roots, we risk letting old fears write today's leadership story. Fear of rejection and failure shows up in subtle but destructive ways. Playing it safe instead of innovating. Avoiding tough conversations to preserve being liked. Over-controlling decisions because letting go feels too risky. Designing strategies that focus on avoiding losses rather than creating opportunities. Behavioral economics has a name for this: loss aversion. Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky showed that humans feel the pain of loss twice as strongly as the joy of gain. Leaders trapped in loss aversion often end up preserving the status quo rather than creating the future. And here's the tragedy. Companies don't die because they take risks. They die because they don't. Now, one thing is crystal clear. Fear is clever. It rarely shouts. It whispers. It convinces us that we are being rational when we are really just being protected. We shouldn't expand right now. Let's consolidate. I won't share that idea. It's not fully baked. Better to follow in sich and Deutsch towards industry standards, then take a chance. All of these sound like strategic caution, but often they're fear in disguise. Leaders mistake avoidance for wisdom when in reality it's paralysis. Fear-based leadership creates cultures of anxiety and stagnation. Teams sense when leaders are playing not to lose instead of playing to win. The ripple effects are powerful. Innovation flatlines because risk feels dangerous. Engagement drops because people mirror the leader's passion. Trust erodes because employees feel decisions are guided by insecurity, not vision. An organization led by fear may survive, but it will never thrive. And what is the alternative? The opposite of fear-driven leadership is not reckless bravery. It is intentional creation. Leadership is not about avoiding the future you don't want. It is about proactively and intentionally building the future you do want. This means choosing bold strategies even when rejection is possible, having difficult conversations rather than preserving surface harmony, taking ownership of decisions instead of deflecting responsibility. Leaders who act this way step out of the shadow of fear. They recognize fear's presence, but they don't hand it the keys. Let me break it to you. Fear is not something you get over. It's wired too deeply. The goal is not to eliminate fear, but to change how we respond to it. This is where the analogy of allergies comes in. Just as doctors use exposure therapy, introducing the allergen in small doses to build tolerance, leaders can do the same with fear. So, how can you manage fear? You can use exposure as leadership training. You don't fight fear by avoiding it. You rewire your brain by facing it, one step at a time. Start small. If you fear rejection, share one bold idea in a meeting this week. Build gradually. If public speaking terrifies you, start by speaking for 2 minutes in a safe setting before addressing a large audience. Reframe failure. If you fear making mistakes, design small experiments where failure is safe and treat it as data, not disaster. Every exposure sends a signal to the brain. This is not life-threatening. Over time, the amygdala calms and conscious awareness grows. Fear remains, but it loses its grip. Courage grows in its place. Wrapping up, fear kept our ancestors alive, but fear, left unchecked, keeps modern leaders stuck. The absence of fear is impossible, but the presence of courage, compassion, and intentional action is always available. Happiness is the absence of negative energy, just as darkness is the absence of light. Leaders who let fear drive them will live in shadows. Leaders who face fear, manage it, and move forward intentionally will not only build their own future, they'll build a future worth following. So I leave you with the question, are you avoiding risks trying to predict the future, or are you building the future you want? If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, and share. Also, check out our articles on LinkedIn and our podcast on Spotify. Just search for the H2H experiment. Thanks for watching and see ya next time. Bye.